Imagine finding out your parents secretly signed over your promised $500,000 condo to your sister. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Hi, I'm Claire, and instead of fighting for something already lost, I made a choice that changed my life forever. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Like no matter how hard you tried, it was never enough? Stay with me, and let's talk about what happens when you stop chasing the love you were never given and start building a life on your own terms. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to let go to finally move forward? The backyard was dressed up with pastel balloons swaying in the warm Austin breeze. Folding tables lined the grass, sagging slightly under the weight of crock pots and homemade casseroles. Someone had set up a big poster near the back fence. The words, "Congratulations, Rachel," stretched across it in glittery gold letters. I stood near the drink table, a red plastic cup sweating in my hand. Across the yard, Rachel beamed as family, friends, and neighbors crowded around her. She wore a white dress that floated around her knees, her brown hair curled just so. Mom clapped her hands and called out for everyone to gather around the big sheet cake. It had Rachel's smiling face printed right in the center, framed by the words, "Our star graduate," piped in careful blue icing. As everyone shuffled closer, I stayed back, half watching, half willing myself invisible. Someone brushed past and pressed a small envelope into my hand. I glanced down, a card with glittery letters. Good luck. No name, no personal note inside, just a typed line wishing me all the best in the next chapter. I tucked the card into my pocket and forced a smile when Aunt Margaret waved at me. Grandma Evelyn's words drifted back to me like a soft breeze. Your light doesn't have to be loud to be real. I held on to that thought like a raft. When I was little, I used to think love felt like hugs and late-night stories. But somewhere along the way, love in our family had started to look different. It looked like Mom straightening Rachel's graduation cap 10 times while barely noticing mine sat crooked. It looked like Dad recording every moment of Rachel's speech, but forgetting I had even been on stage, too. The buffet line formed quickly after cake was cut. Mom handed Rachel the first plate, laughing. She earned it. I waited at the end like I always did, scooping a little bit of mac and cheese onto my plate when it was finally my turn. It wasn't that anyone told me not to step forward. It was just that stepping back had become second nature. "Claire, could you grab some extra napkins from inside?" Mom called without even glancing at me. "Sure," I said, even though she didn't hear it. Inside the kitchen, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and barbecue. I leaned against the counter for a second, breathing in the quiet. From the window above the sink, I could see Rachel laughing as someone handed her another gift. A bright teal suitcase. "For all your adventures," they said. Funny. I'd gotten a suitcase too, but it was secondhand, left by a neighbor moving out last spring. No bow, no card. I wiped my palms on my jeans and carried the stack of napkins outside, weaving through the crowd that barely noticed I was gone. Rachel tore open presents under the wide oak tree. Luggage, electronics, even a framed certificate Dad had made with Rachel's future achievements printed at the top and bullet points underneath. It was half joke, half prediction. People laughed, clapped. Someone wiped away a tear. I sat on the picnic bench nearest the fence, chewing slowly through a slice of cake that tasted sweeter than I wanted it to. Every so often, a neighbor would come by, tousle my hair, say something like, "You're next, kiddo," without even asking where I was headed next. Not that anyone had asked. Rachel talked about her plans to major in communications at the University of Texas. Mom practically glowed every time she said the word university. When it was my turn to mention I'd gotten a full-ride scholarship to a smaller liberal arts college in Washington, Mom just nodded vaguely, already shifting the conversation back to how Rachel would need new luggage for college tours. Later, as the sun dipped lower and the fairy lights strung across the trees flickered on, I found myself by the fence, a little apart from everyone else. The old boards pressed against my back, grounding me. Across the yard, Rachel posed for pictures, wrapped in hugs and kisses and congratulations. Dad was filming, capturing every second. Mom adjusted Rachel's dress, wiped something from her cheek. The crowd's laughter blended with the crickets starting to sing in the dusk. I pulled the crumpled good luck card from my pocket and stared at it. The letters glinted under the string lights. I thought about all the other times growing up when Rachel was the one invited to sleepovers, to birthday parties, to dress fittings. I thought about the piano recital when I'd played flawlessly and Mom barely looked up from texting about Rachel's soccer tryouts. Maybe I should be used to it by now. Maybe being invisible in my own family was just part of the deal. But tonight, standing there under the heavy sky, it stung more than ever. Seattle always smelled like rain. It clung to the sidewalks, pressed against the windows, soaked into the thick wool of my only decent jacket. I'd thought moving away would feel freeing, like stepping into a bigger, brighter world. But as I hauled my single suitcase up 4 flights of creaky stairs into a 400-square-foot studio that smelled faintly of old carpet and burnt toast, freedom felt more like an ache in my arms and a lump in my throat. My first night, I sat cross-legged on the secondhand futon, listening to the neighbor's television bleed through the thin walls. The rain tapped a steady rhythm against the window pane. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. I pulled out my phone, half hoping for a message from home, something warm to wrap myself in. There was a single text from Mom. "Rachel made the dean's list. We're so proud." I typed out a congratulations from my sister, then deleted it. Instead, I set the phone down face first on the table and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally dragged me under. Professor Linda Green came into my life like a lighthouse in a foggy harbor. She was tough in the way that didn't sugarcoat anything, but kind enough to push you toward your best without making you feel small. "You have an eye for stories," she said once, sliding a marked-up portfolio across the table. "Don't waste it making things just to fill space." I clung to that encouragement like a lifeline. Every weekday morning, I took the bus to the community college across town. After classes, I split my time between a diner on 45th Street, where I slung coffee and greasy omelets to construction workers, and the campus library checking in returns and shelving dusty volumes until my fingers ached. Some nights, I was so tired, I'd sit at the little kitchen counter in my studio, still wearing my apron, eating dry cereal straight from the box because even pouring milk felt like too much effort. Outside, rain blurred the city lights into a watercolor wash. Inside, the floor creaked when I shifted my weight. The heater coughed sporadically, and the single hand-me-down lamp bathed everything in a tired yellow glow. Birthdays had never been a big deal in our family, but that fall, when the day rolled around, I thought maybe, just maybe, someone would remember. I came home to a package sitting crookedly against my door. My heart lifted before I even checked the label. It was from my parents. I tore into it, hope catching in my chest. Inside, there was a bag of instant coffee and a 3-pack of white athletic socks. No card. No note. I laughed, but it came out too sharp, almost like a sob. I shoved the socks into a drawer and made myself a cup of the bitter coffee, sipping it while rain battered the window like an impatient guest I couldn't ignore. Mom's voice played in my head. "You'll figure it out. You're tough." Maybe tough was just another word for lonely. Professor Green pulled me aside one evening after class. "You should submit to the winter showcase," she said, flipping through my design project. "You're ready." "I don't know," I mumbled, tucking my hair behind my ear. "There are better students." Her gaze sharpened. "There are flashier students," she corrected. "But you have substance, and that matters more." For the first time in months, a small, stubborn warmth unfurled in my chest. A few days later, while cleaning up the apartment, I decided to finally sort through the mess of papers that had piled up on the counter. Among the junk mail and grocery flyers, I found an official-looking envelope from the Condo Association. Frowning, I tore it open. The letter inside made my stomach drop. It confirmed that ownership of the condo my parents had once promised would be my safety net. The backup plan if things got rough had been quietly transferred to Rachel months ago. No call, no explanation, no conversation, just gone. The faucet dripped steadily into the sink, each drop punctuating the roaring in my ears. I sank onto the futon, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Somewhere between the bus rides and the diner shifts and the silent birthdays, I'd convinced myself that if I worked hard enough, if I stayed strong enough, I'd eventually earn a seat at the table. But the truth was simpler. There had never been a seat for me. I stared out the rain-streaked window as the city blurred into an indistinct smear of lights and shadows. How do you mourn something you never really had? Some betrayals aren't shouted. They're whispered into silence, tucked between casual sentences and half-hearted smiles, like they don't even realize they're handing you a scar instead of a conversation. Winter wrapped Seattle in a damp chill that seemed to seep through the thin walls of my studio. Most nights, I bundled under 2 layers of blankets, listening to the radiator groan and the steady drip of water sliding off the eaves outside. The family group chat buzzed occasionally. Pictures of Rachel at brunch, Rachel at a new yoga class, Rachel posing with a new golden retriever puppy she had just adopted. I scrolled through them sometimes, detached, like flipping past ads in a magazine I hadn't subscribed to. One evening, after a long shift at the diner, I finally worked up the nerve to call home. The knot in my stomach tightened as I waited for someone to pick up. Mom answered on the 3rd ring. "Claire, hi honey. Oh, we were just talking about Rachel's new place." The words hit before I could say anything. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, forcing my voice steady. "Yeah, about that. I got a letter from the Condo Association. It said, ownership was transferred." There was a pause, a small telling silence that thudded louder than any shout. Mom's voice brightened, almost artificially. "Oh, that. Well, Rachel needed it more, sweetheart. You're doing fine up there in Seattle, right? We figured you'd understand." I pressed my fingers against my temple. "You figured I'd understand? Well, you're always so independent. Rachel, she needs a little more security." I closed my eyes. For a second, I imagined the condo I'd never lived in, the safety net they'd once dangled in front of me like a promise. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but Dad's voice floated in from the background, muffled. "Tell her it's not personal. Not personal." I hung up a few minutes later after exchanging a few more stiff pleasantries, the way strangers might at a bus stop on a rainy day. That night, I sat at my tiny kitchen counter, a cup of watery ramen cooling beside me, and stared at the envelope again. The legal jargon blurred, but the message was clear enough. What was once meant to be my fallback, my emergency plan, now belonged entirely to someone else. I vented to a coworker during a slow night at the diner, wiping down tables under the tired hum of fluorescent lights. "You should fight it," she said, slamming a ketchup bottle down for emphasis. "You got proof, right?" I did. A few old emails, a shaky paper trail of half-promises. It would be messy, ugly. It would mean hiring a lawyer, filing complaints. It would mean dragging my parents and sister into a legal battle, putting something irreparable into writing. I went home that night and lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. Somewhere deep inside, anger boiled under my ribs. But underneath the anger was a heavier truth. No lawsuit would fix what had already been broken. No courtroom could make them see me. Scrolling through Instagram in a daze, I stumbled across Rachel's latest post. "New condo tour, so excited to start this next chapter. Blessed, grateful." The video panned over polished floors, sunlit windows, a sparkling white kitchen with granite countertops. In the background, I caught a glimpse of a small framed photo on the counter. Rachel in her graduation gown, flanked by Mom and Dad, all smiling like they'd won the lottery. There was no space for me in that picture. There never had been. Grandma Evelyn's words surfaced again, soft but steady. "Protect your peace like a home you built yourself." I turned off my phone, set it face down on the nightstand, and pulled the covers up to my chin. I could fight. I could claw and scream and demand a place at the table, or I could build a different table, a different home, one that didn't need their approval stamped across every brick. I thought about all the nights I'd spent dragging myself through double shifts, all the mornings when the only person cheering me on was the woman staring back from the cracked mirror. I wasn't invisible. I was just done asking to be seen. Somewhere between the cold rain and the quiet betrayal, I made my choice. They had signed over the condo. I signed over my expectations. Turns out, when you stop holding up walls that were never yours to begin with, they crumble faster than you expect. Summer 2020 was a strange kind of quiet. Seattle's streets, usually humming with music and chatter, fell into a hush, broken only by the low murmur of delivery trucks and the soft whir of bicycles passing by. Stores taped handwritten notes to their doors, closed until further notice. Restaurants pivoted to take-out menus, and parks posted signs asking for masks and distance. Inside my tiny studio, life shrank down to a few essentials: a desk wedged under the window, my laptop, a battered sketchbook, and the steady hum of my second-hand fan clicking as it turned. I threw myself into my final classes and freelance gigs, designing logos for local shops trying to survive the shutdowns, cleaning up websites for nonprofits, scrambling to move their services online. Some days blurred into each other. Coffee, design drafts, Zoom lectures, late-night edits, sleep, repeat. Family texts still trickled in occasionally. Updates about Rachel's new hobbies, Dad's latest barbecue experiments, pictures of Mom's flower garden. I skimmed them, but never answered more than a polite thumbs up or a short, glad to hear it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was somewhere beyond it. Professor Green continued to be the steady thread through the noise. She emailed me opportunities, left short comments on my project drafts, reminded me in her no-nonsense way that talent was only half the battle. Resilience was the rest. "You're building something," she said during one virtual meeting, her image flickering slightly from a bad Wi-Fi connection. "Doesn't have to be flashy, just real." One afternoon, while double-checking client invoices at my kitchen counter, I got a call from a friend I hadn't seen since pre-pandemic days, someone from the old community college. "Hey, random," she said after the awkward pleasantries. "Did you hear about Rachel's place?" My stomach tightened. What about it? Foreclosure, missed payments for months apparently. Thought you'd want to know. She sounded casual, almost detached, but the words thudded in my ears like distant drums. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at the pile of notes I'd been organizing. Rain streaked the window again, tracing slow, meandering paths down the glass. A week later, the official notice arrived at my address, forwarded automatically. The condo. Gone. No dramatic fights, no frantic calls, no apologies or explanations, just a sterile envelope stamped with the words, "Foreclosure, bank owned." The day I decided to go see it for myself, the city was still in partial lockdown. Streets were emptier than usual. People crossed the road to avoid getting too close. The air smelled like wet asphalt and something sharp underneath, maybe the collective ache of a city trying to keep breathing. The condo building looked the same from a distance, rows of tidy windows, a neat brick facade. But when I got closer, I saw the signs. Faded notices taped to the lobby doors, a for sale placard shoved into the manicured bushes out front. And there it was, leaning crookedly in the front window. Foreclosure, bank owned. No balloons, no ribbon cutting, no tearful handovers, just a silent, unceremonious erasure. I stood there for a while, hands deep in my jacket pockets, the summer humidity pressing damp against my skin. I thought maybe I'd feel victorious, vindicated somehow. I didn't. Instead, there was only a strange kind of lightness. Like something heavy I hadn't realized I was carrying had quietly slipped off my shoulders. It wasn't just the condo. It was the years of hoping, waiting, trying to prove I was worth something more than polite nods and secondhand praise. Grandma Evelyn once wrote to me in a birthday card I found years later at the bottom of a drawer. Sometimes, survival means letting what's broken break. I understood now. Some things aren't meant to be mended. Some walls aren't worth rebuilding. I watched a couple walk past the building, masks tugged down around their chins, laughing over something one of them had said. The world kept moving. Life kept spilling forward. I adjusted the strap of my bag across my chest and turned away from the building without looking back. Some endings don't need fireworks. Some just need you to keep walking. The first home I ever owned wasn't made of bricks. It was made of choices. Spring in Seattle came slowly, like a shy apology after a long gray winter. Tiny buds cracked open along the sidewalks. The smell of damp earth rose up from the parks. People started peeling off their heavy coats, venturing outside with tentative smiles. I moved into a shared artist loft with two other girls from the design program. The building had once been a factory, all exposed pipes and cracked concrete floors, but the landlord had painted the walls white and thrown in a few oversized windows that let in streams of stubborn sunlight. My corner was small, a mattress tucked against the wall, a makeshift desk cobbled together from milk crates and a salvage door, and a second-hand armchair with stuffing poking through the seams. But it was mine. Every plant perched on the windowsill, every sketch taped to the wall, every coffee cup ring on the battered nightstand. It was all stitched together by my own hands. Classes ended with little fanfare. No traditional graduation ceremony, no cap and gown, just a few congratulatory emails and a virtual slideshow the department sent out with our names spelled correctly. Still, that spring, I won the campus-wide design competition. Professor Green emailed me first thing in the morning. Told you. You have substance. I printed out the digital certificate and thumbtacked it above my desk, right next to a watercolor painting I'd finished one sleepless night during finals. Not because I needed anyone to see it, just because it reminded me that I could. The agency offer came 2 weeks later, a full-time junior designer position at a small but respected media firm downtown. The pay wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and they liked my portfolio enough to give me my own tiny client list right off the bat. On move-in day, I hauled a borrowed pickup truck through narrow streets, laughing as a potted plant slid dangerously across the dashboard at every sharp turn. Friends helped me carry boxes up 3 flights of stairs, dodging curious cats and a neighbor playing guitar off-key on the landing. We christened the new place that night with cheap pizza and thrift store wine, sprawled out across the floor because I didn't have a real table yet. Someone produced a deck of cards. Someone else dug out a portable speaker. By the time the pizza was cold and the wine bottles were empty, we were swapping dreams like trading cards, talking about the books we wanted to write, the murals we wanted to paint, the trips we couldn't afford yet but were already mapping out in our heads. Later, at a rooftop barbecue thrown by one of my new neighbors, I found myself leaning against the rusted railing, a paper plate balanced on my knee. The city stretched out in front of me, glittering under a deep blue sky. Laughter floated through the air. Someone strummed a guitar, wildly off-tune but heartfelt, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the heavy knot in my chest loosen. These people didn't know about the condo. They didn't know about the years of quiet hurt, the birthdays forgotten, the small victories ignored. They just knew me. Claire with the paint-stained jeans, the quick laugh, the portfolio full of bright ideas. It wasn't the family I was born into, but it was the family I had chosen. Professor Green's words came back to me, warm and steady. Sometimes the right audience isn't your family. It's the future you're building. I stayed out on that rooftop long after the others drifted inside, watching the stars blink faintly through the haze. The air smelled like charcoal and possibility. Just as I was learning how to be happy without them, my phone buzzed quietly in my jacket pocket. A text from Rachel. "Can we meet?" I stared at the screen. the world tilting slightly on its axis. I didn't know what she wanted. I didn't know if I wanted to know. But I stood there, the night unfolding around me, and let the question hang in the air a little longer before answering. Not every apology fixes things. Some just free you to move on. The little coffee shop by the waterfront smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread, the kind of scent that softened even the sharpest edges. Outside, fall leaves tumbled along the sidewalk, swirling around bundled-up couples and joggers with scarves flapping behind them. I picked a table by the window, wrapping my hands around a warm paper cup. Across the glass, the water churned and sparkled under the pale gray sky. A bell above the door jingled, and Rachel stepped inside. She was easy to spot even now. The designer handbag slung over her shoulder, the expensive boots that had never touched a muddy sidewalk if she could help it. But there was something different, too. A slump in her shoulders, a hollow look behind her careful smile. She saw me, hesitated, then crossed the room with small, uncertain steps. "Hey," she said, sitting down opposite me. "Hey," I replied, keeping my voice even. For a moment, we just sat there, the low murmur of other customers filling the silence between us. I stirred my coffee, waiting. Rachel twisted her hands together in her lap. "I'm not sure how to start," she said. "I guess. I didn't realize how much I didn't see. About you, about everything." I said nothing, letting the words find their own awkward path. She looked out the window, her voice dropping. "Mom and Dad always said you were fine. You didn't need help. You were strong. I thought I was just lucky." Her fingers brushed the rim of her coffee cup, tracing the edge over and over. "I'm sorry," she said finally, voice thick. "Not just for the condo, for all of it. I don't even know how to fix it." I took a slow breath, the warmth of the coffee cup grounding me. There was a time, not that long ago, when I would have grabbed at this moment, desperate to patch up the cracks with hurried forgiveness, to claw my way back into a family shape that had never really fit me. But now, sitting here, I realized I didn't need to fix anything. Some things weren't broken. They were just done. I offered her a small smile, not bitter, not cold, just real. "Thank you," I said, "for saying that." She nodded, biting her lip. "I'm okay," I added quietly. "I really am." Rachel looked like she wanted to say more, but the words tangled and fell away. Instead, she just nodded again, blinking hard. Grandma Evelyn's words floated through my mind, soft but steady. "Forgive, not because they deserve it. Forgive because you do." We sat there a little longer, sipping coffee, letting the past lay itself down between us like an old worn coat, finally shrugged off. There were no dramatic declarations, no hugs, no promises to start fresh, just two women who had once shared a childhood, now sharing a quiet table and a few truths too long unspoken. When the check came, I paid without thinking. Rachel reached for her bag, but I waved her off, not out of obligation, out of peace. We stood outside afterward, the cold wind tugging at our sleeves. She gave a small, uncertain wave before turning away, her figure folding into the crowd along the waterfront. I stayed there a moment longer, letting the wind tug at my hair, the city moving around me in easy rhythm. As I walked back into the cool Seattle air, I finally understood. Some homes you build yourself, one quiet step at a time. Walking back into the cool Seattle air that day, I realized the best homes aren't handed to you. They're built one choice, one quiet step at a time. Some wounds don't need to be stitched up to heal. They simply need the freedom to stop hurting. In life, forgiving isn't about forgetting or excusing the past. It's about releasing yourself to step fully into the future you deserve. If this story touched a part of your heart, feel free to share your thoughts or memories. Sometimes just telling our stories is how we start building new homes of our own.